This week on the Nurture series, we welcome Noah Ben-Shia. I'm Chava Floryn, and I can't wait to dive right in. Noah Ben-Shia is one of North America's most respected and beloved poet and philosophers. He's a Pulitzer Prize-nominated best-selling author of 28 books translated in 18 languages. He's a scholar, and he's spoken to numerous prestigious universities and institutions, including the Library of Congress and the United States Department of Defense. He's been published by Oxford University Press and the World Bible Society in Jerusalem. He was a dean at UCLA at the tender age of 22, and at 30, he became a fellow at several esteemed think tanks. He served as a private advisor to corporate and political leaders and was nominated for the Grawemeyer Award for ideas that improve the world order. Noah Ben-Shia has been a really good friend over the years, and I first met him on set of a fantastic show called The Search, where I interviewed all different kinds of people on what is the meaning of life. Noah gave incredible insight in that interview, and I had to bring him back on for this one as well. Howard Schultz, the founder of Starbucks, praises Noah as having elevated the human spirit to great heights with his wisdom. In fact, Deepak Chopra remarked that the insights in Noah Ben-Shia's work will benefit and transform all those who read it. Even Sandy Koufax of the Los Angeles Dodgers has deemed him a great friend, saying it's a very nice thing to have an old friend who is full of wit and wisdom. And for me, that friend is Noah Ben-Shia. Well, Sandy, you and I are in good company. I too am very blessed to know Noah Ben-Shia, and he has been a very major part of my life as not only a dear friend, but a mentor, a teacher. You can go on to bookshop.org in my Nurture series book list, and you can find his book, Jacob the Baker, which is set to become a feature film. I'm excited about that. This week's show is entitled The 10 Commandments for Tough Times with Noah Ben-Shia.
Noah Ben-Shia, 10 Commandments for Tough Times. Number 1. Being broke is not the same as being broken, and losing money is not the same as being lost. Number 2. Don't confuse having less with being less, or having more with being more, or what you have with who you are. 3. Slow down. What you're chasing may be trying to catch you. 4. Prayer is a path where there is none. 5. Put your faith and not your fears in charge. 6. God only gave you 2 arms. If you're busy hugging the past, you can't embrace the future. Don't let the past kidnap your future. 7. This too shall pass. Change is the only constant. Guilt won't change the past. Anxiety won't improve the future. 8. Do what you can, but never forget that letting go is very different from giving up. Number 9. Tough times don't require you to be tough on yourself. Beating yourself up is not an act of character. Remember, remember, remember. Number 10. Remember, things don't have to be good for you to be great.
What is it that the 2020 world needs to glean from this very trying year? It's been so difficult, probably more difficult than any other year we've seen in many years since World War II. And I'm curious, like, you write every day, you are listening to the reverberations of the world, and you're listening to what people are saying to each other, but then you're giving the chance to carve out time to really invite your own thoughts to the process. So I'm curious what your lessons have been. What do you think the main lesson is for this year?
In the 10 Commandments, which are sacred to 3 major religions in the world, the only holiday, the only time out that's noted is the Sabbath. And noting the Sabbath, it also establishes the concept of time, because there was no time before there was a notion of the Sabbath. There was just days. There was no one day Tuesday.
But one of the requirements in the Sabbath is to take a time out. And if you waited for everything to be okay in life before you took a time out, if you waited for everything to be okay in life before you came to peace in some way, then you were making a mistake, because you cannot hold the world responsible for you finding a state of peace. The world is in its own chaos. It's got its own agenda. It's got its own spin on things. But I have this meditation, if you will, now that it might be called a meditation. I mean, years ago, I used to say that when I was talking, I felt like I was sending myself a telegram, and people looked at me absently, and I realized, excuse me, I feel like I'm sending myself a text message, and then people understood what I was saying. But here is my take on this Sabbath and time out. Sabbath, which is holy to all of the Abrahamic religions. Um, and that is, if the Sabbath is one day in seven when we are supposed to find peace, come to some sort of level of peace within, without requiring the world to be at peace for us to come to peace, then what if we took that same notion, and not one day in seven, but what if 1 hour in seven we allowed ourselves to come to peace? Or what, if you will, we allowed ourselves 1 minute in seven that we allowed ourselves to come to peace? Or what if 1 second in seven we allowed ourselves to come to peace? So in every 7 seconds you had 1 second of peace. How would your day be transformed? And I think that's what's required in a time when there is so much anxiety as the password in the world. I'm trying to be a witness to that in myself. My take on it, again, is people try to have something, but in that it's like sort of acquiring it. But to have peace, be peace. To have love, be love. To have joy, be joy. Avere pace, sia pace. Avere amore, sia amore. Avere gioia, sia gioia. My love affair with Italy and Italian comes through. So I think that's the requirement, is because that's what Buber talked, the I-thou rather than the I-it relationship. He talked about it in relationship to others, but it means we're not dealing with the world as an objectified outside us, but the thou of the world as an extension of ourselves. So it requires us to enter into that, and once we've entered into it, then we can have that as an experience. If you will, the path ahead is the path within.
I think that when you're younger, or when I was younger, we assume that somebody's going to hand us that sense of peace, or that sense of, not feeling afraid, that sense of not being so stressed out. And really, it's the thing we have to take for ourselves.
A lot of us were raised think that when Mr. or Miss Right was going to come into your life, they were going to bring peace into your life. And the truth of the matter was that if you love yourself, then you can be loving of others. If you can be in a state of peace with yourself, you can be in a state of peace with others. If you can appreciate yourself, you can appreciate others. It does, we are ground zero for ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or as Victor Hugo said, if you want to clean the world, sweep your porch.
I love that.
So to play all these things, I love the great truths I have found across time, and even as my wife laughs that Noah remembers all of these things just somehow in his mind, she also reminds me that sometimes I can't remember where I parked my car. So quotes I'm pretty good at, but where my car is sometimes is troublesome and humbling for sure.
You said that all prayer doesn't begin with "Dear God," but "Dear me." That definitely fits into what you're talking about. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. A lot of times people think that the relationship with God is like climbing Jacob's ladder. It's vertical. But God says, well, I really appreciate all the kind things you have to say about me, all the kind words about me. But really, in the 10 commandments, the first 5 commandments are between you and me, but the next 5 commandments are between you and the people around you. So I think that you have to look, if you want to connect with God, you have to look to a horizontal relationship with the people around you. And consequently, if you want to be in a relationship horizontally with the people around you, you have to be internally in that relationship with yourself. So the latter, first of all, requires you to climb into yourself and be self-loving. From there, you can be other-loving. And from being other-loving, now God finds you worthy of that love. I think that the golden rule says that we have to treat others, love others as you love yourself. And I think that's a wonderful golden rule. But the golden rule is a fool's gold if we're prepared to treat others with the same disrespect we have for ourselves. So if you have disrespect for yourself, then you will treat others with that same disrespect. So to make that the golden rule golden requires you to, first of all, treat yourself with respect. From treating yourself with respect, you can treat others with respect. And when you treat others with respect, at that point in time is when I think, I'm not sure that Hashem, the Av HaRachamim, the Father of Compassion, needs me as a press secretary. But I think when we can be self-respecting and consequently other respecting, then I think that we draw the respect and from above.
I agree. I couldn't agree. I think you said that so perfectly. The topic of this is the 10 commandments for tough times. And, but, before we get into them, first of all, like, what prompted you to even make that list?
At this point in my life, even though I am such a kid, I don't think I've been called into mortality's office, but I know I'm in the waiting room. So if I know I'm in the waiting room, I clearly have, I hope, it doesn't necessarily come. Getting old doesn't make you wise any more than getting sick makes you a saint. But I do think that as I understand why I'm here to be a source of strength to others. That's why I'm here in this lifetime. And so when I felt the anguish in so many lives, I felt that if I could put down 10 tips for 10 commandments for tough times, maybe I would be an ally to other people, because that's what I'm here. That's the work I'm here to do.
Well, you've definitely been that for me. I mean, you and I have had a relationship for a bunch of years. I got to meet you on the set of The Search, and you gave me a lot to think about back then. You still do. Let's talk about the very first tip, commandment number 1. So the first commandment is being broke is not the same as being broken. Losing money is not the same as being lost. And finding your balance is not something you can do on a balance sheet. I love that.
So I think a lot, if that requires, it's like trying to explain a joke, whether it requires any further elucidation. It's just that too often we're raised in societies in general. It used to be Eastern society or Western society more than Eastern society, but I think the whole world now shares this confusion because the world trades financial success with a successful life, and the absence of income as there's something profoundly absent in your life. And I just think that it's important to not lose perspective, because you can be rich in many ways and still a very, very poor soul.
Yeah. My grandmother was not a very wealthy woman. She lived, paycheck to paycheck and off of her Social Security. And every time I'd visit her, she'd always say, I'm the wealthiest woman in the world. And I would say to her, Bubby, what makes you so wealthy? And she said, have you seen all of my grandchildren? When you are all here, it makes me feel like the wealthiest woman in the world.
Groucho Marx got it right. Rich, I've been rich and I've been poor. Rich is better. We're not confused. Not to suffer from, to have a roof over your head, to have food, to feel secure so you can pay for things. Those are no small matter in life. And we know that over half of the divorces that happen because of economic pressures that people feel.
Or half of the horrible relationships that are staying together because of economic stress, because they can't afford to get divorced.
That's right. Or that they think that's the glue of the relationship, which only adds to despair in that level.
Sometimes the wealthiest people are the loneliest and the saddest. It doesn't always mean that that it's bringing you joy. You know, you still have to tap into that greater sense of self, even with or without. It's still a constant game in life.
Being rich doesn't make you great, and neither does being poor. So there are
Yeah.
all of those aspects of things. And one of the things that often happens is when people begin to accumulate outsized wealth, the first thing they do is build a wall so no one else can get over the wall and try to get at them. They're always thinking that somebody wants something from them, and oftentimes people do. But I think, again, it comes back to engendering where you have respect for yourself and what matters as a value in this life.
Well, we were talking about, there is such a massive divide in this country when it comes to those who have and those who don't have. And I think that fissure has created the pain and suffering. I think one of the things that happens when people are struggling financially is they start to struggle not just financially, but their sense of worth starts to decay. And I love what you wrote in terms of broke but not broken.
Yeah.
We have to like really remember that even if we don't have what we need financially or we're not where we need to be, we can't make that the bar for discovering self. You can do anything you want to do in this life. Your sense of self should not be diminished by how much you have or not or don't have.
Oh, yeah. I think at the end of the day, it comes down to how you feel about who you are,
Yeah.
you know, and coming and how you feel about who you are and being an honest witness about that, an honest witness about it. I've met men and women on both sides of this routine, and I, when I was a child, I come from very much a blue collar family, and I was the first person in my family that graduated from high school, let alone university. And I was doing well academically, intellectually was my rocket ship out, such as it was. And my father, when I was a young man, said to me, God has blessed you with certain talents, but they're not there just for you to get your head deeper in the trough. We're all seduced by wealth and vanity and all the attending, royalty that go along with it. But getting to a place with peace about who you are and how you are as a person. That may sound like, wow, there's nothing. That's pretty simplistic, Noah. You say, yeah, well, sometimes the obvious is camouflaged by its obviousness. You know,
Yeah.
there's a woman I knew her name was, we referred to as Aunt Edith, a friend of mine's aunt, and she was born into Hasidic royalty in Eastern Europe. The Holocaust comes and she flees for her life, and she winds up in Detroit working as a seamstress. And I met her, she must have been about 75 or 80. And she always was so joyful, just had the right attitude, not unlike you talked about your Bubba. And so I said, Aunt Edith, you're always so happy. You seem so joyous. I said, well, how can you do that? She says, a long time ago, I decided you could be sad or you could be happy. I decided to be happy. I said, well, that just sounds like common sense. She goes, common sense is not so common, you know.
That's great. I love that. I love that. Common sense, not so common. It's great.
There's the saying in Italian that's wise, which is spiro, spero, spiro, spero, spiro, spero. It says, I breathe, I hope. I breathe, I hope. The breath gives us hope, and in hope there is breath. That's my drush on that.
I love that. You definitely know how to give a lot of people hope, Noah. In the second commandment, you write, don't confuse having less with being less, exactly what you and I are talking about in this moment, having more with being more, or what you have with who you are.
I don't know who this guy Noah Ben-Shea is, but he definitely knows how to turn a phrase. I just really
You
appreciate
really do. You know how to turn a
it.
phrase. Let's go a little bit upwards. I wanted to ask you about number 7. You write, this too shall pass. Change is the
Yeah.
only constant. In order to take a breath, you must release your breath. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's a great line in Hebrew, Gamza Yavor,
This too shall pass. Yes.
I have this thought about in order to take a breath, you must release your breath. But I'm going to go backward for a moment, okay? The first person, again, all 3 Abrahamic religions respect this story, that when God created the first person, God blew into the red earth. And the word red in Hebrew is Adam, so the first person was called Adam, from the red earth. So God blew the first breath into the first person. So Adam, was inspired, filled with the breath of God. But the only way that Adam could take a breath is if he could release his breath. If you doubt this for a second, tell me how long you can hold your breath. So in order for Adam to take a breath, he had to release his breath. And when he released his breath, it would be breathed by the people around him. So we are all inspired by God, and we are all conspiring, breathing together. Conspiring in English has a pejorative quality, meaning you're planning to do something bad, but it really means that you're planning together, conspiring. So we are all inspired by God, and we are all conspiring with God. So the very first breath that was ever breathed into the very first person is still being passed from person to person. We are conspiring with the inspiration of God from the very first person. So what does it mean to take a breath? You have to release your breath. In order to be more, you have to be willing to be less.
Yeah.
You have to give it up. It's just the way it works. If you don't do that, if you don't know that if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room, then you might not ever find out that in order to take a breath, you have to release your breath. Humility is called for, and that's in every circumstance. But the sheer act of respiring and breathing.
It's interesting. It's like when you take a breath, you make yourself bigger, but then when you release your breath, you're making yourself smaller.
When you make yourself less, what does it allow you to do? To make yourself
bigger. Yeah. Beautiful. Right. I love that. It's fantastic.
So you have to stop and say, well, I could do that, but if I did that, I would make myself less. Yes. And if you did that, what would happen then? Then you'd have the capacity to be more. If you ever walked out on a spring night and heard bullfrogs singing, you would be reminded of this lesson.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. In an article you wrote for Psychology Today entitled, There's Only the Trying, How Do We Create Stress for Ourselves and How Does It Reflect in Other Ways? This has been the most stressful year for most people. And you wrote, when our focus is backward, we live lives that feel backed into a corner. What frontward focus should we be leaning into to get through this year?
Ironically, the path ahead is the path within. And what I talked about or had felt for many, many years is that, again, in the 3 major Abrahamic religions, or the 3 Abrahamic religions, there's only one commandment of the 10 commandments that speaks to time, and it's the keeping of the Sabbath. And the keeping of the Sabbath actually created time. Before there was the notion of the Sabbath, there was no notion of a time. People just worked. There was no work. It had nothing. It was like childhood wasn't invented until the 19th century. Until then, there's no childhood. There were just small workers.
Yeah.
There was no time before the Sabbath. So why is the Sabbath sacred? Well, the Sabbath is sacred in a number of ways, but one of them is that you can't wait for everything to be okay in life before you choose to bring peace into your life. Bringing peace into your life is your responsibility, regardless of what is going on in the world around you. If the number one illness in the world is depression, and the number one reason for depression is stress, and the number one stress is people trying to be in charge of what is out of their control, you're not in charge of what the world delivers to your door. You are in charge of your response. Respond, don't react. Good little twist on that one. Respond, don't react in life. I always tell people the best 4 words is go Teflon, not Velcro. When people do things to you, they're not doing things to you, they're doing things for them. When the world is negative around you, your responsibility is not to confuse what the world's agenda, who somebody who's likes you doesn't like you agenda. Your responsibility is what is your agenda to find peace in the middle of it. Guilt won't change the past, and anxiety will not improve the future.
You couldn't have said that better. I think that there has been more anxiety because there's so much cross-talking social media has brought to the forefront, that there's so much noise, but nobody's listening.
Each of us is a time machine. In your memory, you can go back in time. In your imagination, you can go forward in time. But the only place you can steer from is in the now. And guilt won't change the past, and anxiety won't improve the future. To be in the now, to be in the moment. Guys like Eckhart Tolle and stuff have made a fortune reminding people,
Sure.
be in the now. But being in the now, it is an ancient lesson. And doing that, it requires you to be witness that you don't live in a static universe. You live in a state that's dynamic. 2,300 years ago, Heraclitus said, "No man puts his foot in the same river twice, not the same river, not the same man." So whoever you were in the now that was then. You have to be in the now. And this is sort of a tangential to it, but it might speak to some people. Oftentimes, I have people come up to me after I've given a talk someplace, when people were gathering to give talks, or maybe after a Zoom conversation. And one of the questions I had one time in particular, I thought was. It was visualizing. This woman came up to me and says, my husband isn't the man he used to be. And she wasn't talking about a Viagra moment. And I said to her, well, that's an interesting stance. I said, but the question is not if he isn't the man he once was, but whether you're prepared to accept him for the man he might yet become. And she looked at me. I said, of course, your willingness to accept him for the man he might yet become requires you to accept you for the person you might yet become. It is a great sadness in relationships when we condemn people for not being who they were. And it's a terrible thing in a relationship with your children or your mate to require them to be who they were. Everybody is a state of transformation. Einstein said energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It can only change form. We are a reflection of that. We are always in a state of metamorphosis. I'll tell you a wonderful story. There was a boy, I think it's a wonderful story because it's resonated with me. There was a boy who was out walking in the woods, and he came across a cocoon. And he saw that in this cocoon, the butterfly was like trying to get out. So the little boy, he had a good heart. And he said, I'll help the butterfly come out of the cocoon. So he took out a little penknife and he cut a slot along the cocoon, and the butterfly came out. And he watched the butterfly there, and he watched the butterfly there, and he watched the butterfly there. And the butterfly kept trying to spread his wings so they would dry, and kept trying to spread his wings so they dry. And he couldn't do it. And he died. Because what the boy didn't know was the struggle to come out of the cocoon would have squeezed the liquid out of the butterfly's wings. So when he came out, his wings would dry. James Michener tells a story. When he was a boy in Bucks County, he was walking through the country and he saw this incredible tree covered in fruit, apples that were like unbelievable. And there was a farmer there. And the farmer said to a young James Michener, "It's a pretty amazing tree, isn't it?" He says, "Boy, I've never seen a tree. This is unbelievable." The farmer said, "You should have seen this tree a year ago. It looked like it was dead. There was nothing happening here." So Michener said, "Well, what did you do?" Farmer said, "Well, I took a nail about this long, about 10 inches long, and I drove it into the trunk of the tree. And now it came back to life." So there are times in all of our lives when transition is a struggle, when we need to be self-shocked, if we will. I don't mean by the negative, by daring ourselves to be loving, daring ourselves to be believing, daring ourselves to have faith, faith being seeing things unseen, and seeing what the transformation is in our life. But there is if you think that your life is going to be a flat constant, then you are primarily just unobservant of a state of a dynamic universe that you live in. And that means that, God, the divine, the deity, however you come to understand that notion of a bio consciousness, that this universe is without beginning or end. I have this other story lesson, maybe perhaps that will serve.
Please.
I think for each of us, we have to walk down the path in life, prepared at any moment for the worst evil to leap out and attack us. I think we have to walk down the path in life also, prepared at any moment for the greatest joy to leap out and embrace us. And I think we have to walk down the path in life prepared for absolutely nothing to happen at any transforming moment. And I think we have to walk down the path in life prepared for all three of these states concurrently. Do not presume. Be in the moment, to the moment that is unfolding.
If anybody wants to know what your latest work is, how about if you just give us your latest things that we could look forward to from Noah Ben-Shia? What are you working on?
The latest thing that Noah Ben-Shia is working on is Noah Ben-Shia. And that takes as much honest energy and witness and gratitude and humility that I can muster on any day. And sometimes I'm pretty good at it, and sometimes I disappoint myself. I
Thank God you have a wife. She can always keep you accountable.
I have a wife and I have children.
That's right. No matter how far we think we've gone, there's always those beautiful people to keep us on track, right, Noah?
Yes. I think sometimes if we were in this conversation having dinner together instead of a Zoomcast, there are innumerable times in the conversation that my wife might have kicked me under the table and told me, I've said enough already. I would just invite people to go onto Amazon, anywhere, and find any of the 4 Jacob the Baker books. The Jacob the Baker books are a process we're in the making. I can't be any more open about it right now, but we're making, there's a motion picture that's being produced and in the works. There's a play, and there are 2 new books that I'm working on from very different directions that we have contracts for. So I have, I'm still a guy who spends a great deal of time every day in the office looking at a screen. And I woke up one time in London, and next to the bed was a note that said, I write things wiser than I am. I'm trying to honor that.
Thank you, Noah, so much for being here on the show, for giving our listeners such wisdom and love and compassion. We all need it more than ever right now.
Thanks, Chava. Thanks for having me. I would say to everybody who's listening to you, Chava, who is being in the good to do this. In Hebrew, it's chazak, chazak, v'ni chazak. And my translation is, be strong, and be a source of strength to others. Of all the things you can make in life, why not make a difference?
The one thing that we talked about more than anything throughout this entire conversation with Noah was that we are divine creatures with the capacity to create divine, holy experiences. With the constant barrage of the human experience being on the course to savage brutality as a result of hatred, disease, and materialism, Noah brings a common theme to all of his stories and his conversations, as you had the opportunity to listen to today, which is we are responsible for one another, and we are culpable towards igniting ourselves. And if we do not ignite our own fire with empowered and loving thoughts and behavior, how can we ever expect to ignite our neighbors? I'm Chava Floryn. Thanks for tuning in to the Nurture Series. Catch our podcast on Spotify and iTunes today.